Hello, everyone. Welcome to Move for a Movement. I have with me here today J Michael Windward, who is a Boston-based artist, primarily does ballroom, but also dances with Peter DeMuro's Public Displays of Motion. We also have Peter on the show. Um, Thank you so much for being with us today, J
Thank
Michael.
you. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. I love what you do. So,
Likewise.
thank yeah, you are a ballroom dancer and you also dance contemporary modern. So I would love to hear how you came to those different art forms, sort of your story as a dance artist.
Yeah, sometimes I forget about, as far as this part of the story goes, that when I was just starting dance in high school. I started dancing in high school because Lowell Public High School in Lowell, Massachusetts, what's known as Lowell, Massachusetts, had a dance program, and you could do that instead of gym. So I said, "Yep, sign me up." And when my grandparents heard that I was taking dance, they were like, "Oh, is this ballroom dance?" And I was like, "I don't even know what you're talking about." Like I couldn't even conceive of what they meant because I found it really
Right.
interesting when I got into it. And that little piece, like that, feels like a missing piece of the puzzle that I forget about sometimes, you know. But then I went on to do modern dance in college at Bennington College, and it was not until I was maybe 24, 25, like a few years out of school, being like, what do I do with this degree? That I
Oh,
applied for a ballroom dance job. I was like, well, at least I'll be moving, you know, at least I'm dancing for a living. And then I did that for 7 years and did not do. I remember at some point a couple years into it being like, oh, this. I don't know what about the culture of this dance for. I mean, it felt a little weird to me getting into it, but then at some point I flip a switch flipped in my brain and was like, well, you'll develop a skill set and just sort of commit to it. I didn't do any contemporary dance, any modern dance, nothing. It was just that was the world I was in for 5 more years. So I spent about 7 years doing ballroom dancing exclusively, and then
mm,
didn't until I met Peter and coming to the dance complex and moving to Boston from Plymouth, where I was teaching there, was did I even think about like contemporary dance or anything else that I started doing ballet. I hadn't done that in years, so it
yeah.
started with modern, in fact.
Yeah. I wish I had that in high school. I would have, I mean, I was already dancing hours after school, but I would have been like, versus gym, I'll take it.
Yeah, I wish that it had occurred to anyone that I could go to one of those hours after school programs. It's just like it wasn't a thing that we thought of in my family. Although we will now, we do now.
Yeah, interesting.
Mhm.
And you've also competed, if I remember correctly, with ballroom dance. And that's its whole like scene and culture because it looks different than other dance competitions where everyone is dancing together, if I remember correctly, sort of
In
in a
ballroom,
circle
yeah, in
and
ballroom it's like that. Yeah,
judges and you gotta like catch the judge's eye is the thing because there's so many people in the room dancing.
yeah, yes. I did that for a little while. I was compete working for a studio, one of the franchise studios, um, and so they host competitions regionally and nationally. And so for work, and there's professional dancing with professional, and so that's a category, and then professionals dancing with amateurs, so pro am, and so there'd be a lot of me dancing with students at competitions, and I became interested when I discovered that there was a same what they not it's North American Same-Sex Partner Dance Association is a North American sanctioning body for gender
Nice.
neutral competitions. When I discovered that world with a colleague and started competing there, it became clear to me like there's a reason why they have a community doing this because not allowed here. And so that
Right.
kind of became a thing about my competitive background. So I stopped competing with the company other than with students, being like,
Uh-huh.
I'm not doing this as with a professional until it's okay if I do it with a male partner, just because that's how I see myself
Right.
within this form. So I would do.
Right.
So we competed and it was fun because with the same sex circuit we could compete. We could travel to compete, and like to commit to that was like to. It just sort of opened up more possibilities anyway. And so that was my only dance competitions background has to do with ballroom dancing, and that's a little bit of that journey.
Right. 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 And you've brought that gender neutral ballroom form to the dance complex, if I remember correctly.
Just and when I was teaching there too, it's just a matter. I mean, it's not just integrating leader and follower into your language as opposed to genderedness, you know.
Right,
But I mean, like, it's just once you think about them as activities as opposed to gendered positions,
right.
I was teaching like that, or I make an effort to teach like that when I was teaching for the school, the franchise school, and then at the
Right,
dance complex. Yeah, I'd offer it as such at dance complex.
right, right. And that's certainly a thing in other dance forms, a thing about, how do we move past these gender binaries? Some ballet works, it's just like beautiful works, but like the male is dancing big and bravado, and then it's like these like very soft women. I'm like, do we really have to be so like hard about these gender binaries? But,
Yeah,
so I think that the dance world in general is kind of looking at that, thankfully, and rethinking.
yeah, yeah. I think intentional rethinking would be really good. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a thing.
It's the thing.
The other thing about it, I mean, when it comes to like, I know at some point we were going to talk about. I was eventually starting to do more work in assisted living and memory care communities and bringing ballroom dancing there.
My next
And
question. Go right
oh,
into it.
wonderful! Well, the gender neutrality became really important for those settings. Like for very specific reasons too. And so it's not. I mean, there are many reasons why of benefit to think maybe to think that way or to think expansively about. About gender in dance, I guess. But
Right, right. So yeah, how did that start? Bringing ballroom dance to elder care facilities, that population, and in general, I know at the dance complex you've done what's called Sunday soirees, which is a free and open. Anyone can come dance and learn these forms.
yeah, and yeah. So when recently a friend and colleague Pompey had a ceremony honoring their father having transitioned, and I was fortunate enough to be able to attend that and was invited to honor some people in my lineage or people that are close to me that have transitioned. And so I was able to honor these two people in particular. Their names are Elsie Mergida and Barbara Carroll, and there are two students that I was dancing with at the Fred Astaire School. Who Elsie came to dance when she was 79, and then she started competing when she was 80. And Barbara came to dance. Her a diagnosis with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma was one of many reasons that inspired her to want to take this on, both later in life. But uh, that what I started realizing when I was toward the end, when I was fizzling out of the school, the franchise school world, I realized that that was the stuff that was that those relationships were motivating me the most, and,
Mm,
and trying to think about how to kind of like move my career in a direction that would just be more and more of that and less of rhinestones and like
right.
all the stuff that the competitive world is about. I mean, it's not to say that there's no benefit to competing in various dance forms, but um, there are some specific implications having to do with the fact that we're talking about other cultural forms that I am concerned about. But also, you just get. I mean, I kind of got tired of it, and not everybody does get tired of it. But to try to spend more time, kind of connecting with people in this way that it could be just, for Elsie and for Barbara, who they become a big part of my lineage. And so to just
Mhm,
remember what dance meant for them is really important for me now.
mhm. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, whew, it's a lot to think about. And you're talking about, it's interesting. It's like what I'm interested in versus what is out there. It doesn't mean that this other thing is bad. It's just, and I think that's important as an artist to learn what you're interested in and to put your resources, your time, your energy into that. I think that's a big part of an artist's journey, right? Because you
Yeah.
can't do it all. You need to have a lane in a way. That's maybe not the right word, but you need to do what you do well and do what you're interested
Yeah, and that when you say that, it also makes me think about. I don't know. I'm hearing spoken about, or a shift toward really what community engaged practice
in. Mhm.
can be, and how informative it can be, and how integral it can be to artistic practice.
Yeah.
in a way that like I'm in school now, and my advisor, when I was telling her about some of the stuff that I was up to, she was like, I'm kind of thinking about what I want my focuses to be. She's just like, community engaged practice. There was a time when she was like, I would not put that on my resume. I didn't want people to know about it, and it's becoming like such an
But,
asset, and it's to honor that as so much part of the practice is something I'm coming to myself. Like there's
mm,
just spiritually, or I don't know, artistically, like that is a big part of it, you know.
right,
Even though, and the thing is, because it's social dancing and it happens in people's living rooms, like that's a distinction between what happens on stage or what for me used to happen in competition. But like
right.
of course, it's all interconnected.
Hmm. I think it was Alvin Ailey who said dance came from the people and it should go back to the people.
Mm,
That
mm,
makes me think that.
mm,
Yeah.
mm.
Yeah. I didn't know you were in school. What are
I,
you studying? Where?
it's a MFA in interdisciplinary arts, and it's the Goddard College, and it's the Washington State campus. So there's Vermont and Washington. Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
And you're still in Boston, right?
Yep,
Did I
it's
have that
remote.
right?
Right now it's low residency, and so we would do 8-day residencies normally there, and now it's on Zoom. So for at least the first two of my resident, I did one, and then there's an upcoming one in the summer, and then it's a 5-semester program. So at some point, I'll hopefully get out there, But for now, and I can still stay rooted to this community while doing that work. So that was important, in making that decision.
What's one experience or sort of lesson you've taken away? You speaking about community engaged practice, but so far in your MFA that has been really striking to you? You think you'll take away has resonated with you so far?
Um, well, this
I didn't
with
ask you this before, so it's like
No,
off the cuff.
also a direct. I know I was aware of some of the questions that you're interested in, which I was really interested in talking about, and I think that
Yeah,
there's two branches to this particular study, which is the performance creation and the decolonial arts praxis.
right.
And the decolonial arts praxis, when I was thinking about this school, and to me, what was interesting was the idea of what it would possibly mean to decolonize ballroom dancing and dance sport.
Mhm.
And the big takeaway from that is that for me to try, I was writing applications and coming up with language about my perspective on this, but to not involve any indigenous people in that conversation. I mean, like, it starts somewhere, but if it's not directly about returning land or indigenous futurity, to call something a decolonization, the learning that's happening pretty quickly for me around that. It's not to say that I don't think that we should be treating ballroom pedagogy with more care, this kind of
Right.
ballroom pedagogy with more care and consideration, but to make distinctions between what decolonization is, what those efforts will entail, who you're listening to, who you're allied with, when it's like the listening as opposed to the actively do it, like
Yeah.
that's a thing, and not to say that we shouldn't be thinking about appropriation, misappropriation of cultural forms, but that distinction is really it's important for me, and yeah, yeah.
Hmm. And that brings up what I wanted to ask you about next, because I know it's meaningful to you, which you've referred to it a couple of times. Ballroom dance, especially Latin forms, coming from cultures that have been marginalized.
Mhm.
And, there are white people going to competitions with these forms.
In
So I'd
self-tanner,
love,
with
yeah,
self-tanner, like I don't know. Well, I have thoughts, but I won't claim to know. But yeah, I have thoughts.
right. It's complex. So I'd love to hear sort of where you are there. You can refer to it a couple times, or certain actions that you're taking to, this is something that I can do to try to decolonize this practice as much as can be done now, as one person.
Yeah, yeah, and even like I think that I'm more and more careful. Like decolonizing, I understand that there is a lot of inherent value in that, even if it's just intentionally in one's mind. But the thing that I used to be, even just a few months ago, was saying I want to work on what it means to decolonize this. That's a word that I don't use quite in the same, like, if it's not about land and if it's not about specific, like that to me is something
Thank you.
I'm approaching with more care the more I'm learning. But also,
Right.
like it's Latin dance, it's cha-cha, it's rumba, salsa. Um, but then there's also swing, foxtrot. I mean, there's black legacies of dance in what
Right.
they get
Yes.
lumped all together, right? In the
Yeah.
ballroom dancing floor, and everybody's, you dance you dance the waltz, which has Bavarian roots. You dance the tango, which has very complicated roots having to
Yep.
do with colonization and enslavement and the Atlantic slave trade. That it, like to put those, then that's how it goes: waltz, tango, and then foxtrot, which has black roots, and then
Right.
and was some of the languages popularized by like Vernon and Irene Castle, who were a white couple. And like I'm not going to try to claim more than I know about the origins of these dance forms, but I do feel like there's something about when they all get lumped together and what the pedagogy about it is now, or how
Interesting.
that
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the one thing that I feel a little bit heartened by is that to try to take the practice and to put it directly to the benefit of elders in my community, that feels
Mhm.
like something. And in some of the conversations, the learning I'm having about it, other people are telling me, well, there's something, it's like trying to not justify, but figure out what the future of this is, and that the fact that that has been a big part of like the past 5 years of my practice, there's something within that. It's not about winning a trophy, and it's not, it's just trying to like figure out what's the purpose of this form. Because
Yeah.
inherently, they're all coming from social styles, just like you were, invoking Ailey. Like, yes, they're coming from the people, and then, you know, are, are is this enterprise of what it means to open these studios and run these competitions. I mean, and it's all happening on stolen land. I mean, so it is, as you say, it's complex. But how do you kind of pick away, like little by little? Are there ways of like even just like approaching it not too gently, but like like just not getting bogged down by what seems like the impossibility of it sometimes?
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Of like, oh, how are you going to deconstruct that?
Yeah, it reminds me in some ways of yoga in the Western world. I teach and practice a lot of yoga, and there are those questions of like, what's the difference between appropriation and appreciation? Like, how do we honor the legacy from which this came and the creators, South Asian people,
Yeah.
and what is the actual history? And like, when you're running a studio, like, do students really want to hear like and those like commercial because we're in a capitalistic society and people got to keep their businesses open, like those kind of questions of like, what does that actually look like? Um, and no one really has the answer, and there are disagreements. But I think the important thing now is that, for so long it wasn't talked about, but now we're at least talking about it.
Agreed. Yeah. And I also think there's some distinction to be made. Like I'm in a boat like that where it's like, well, this is how I make my living is, you know,
Right.
like it's like to say the only one I should feel comfortable of the nine that I was competing in at one point and still use, and like the waltz I could see feeling okay, that feels aligned with my lineage enough that I feel comfortable like kind of like talking about the origins. I mean, I don't have any Bavarian roots, but still like as a white person who is a settler slash trespasser identity, that there's something to me about like, okay, immediately I could say there's something about this form that I feel kind of more comfortable taking on, disseminating, I guess. But then
Mhm.
also I think there's this thing about the difference between um, surviving in capitalism at the same time you're trying to do that picking away at capitalist values and structures as opposed
Yes.
to capitalizing on a dance form. And I'm not going to try to justify the practice that I've been involved in, but in trying to figure out what's the future for myself and
Mm.
something that's going to have a broader community benefit. I will say that like when I'm in certain communities and the merengue comes on, there's a thing about muscle memory and there's a thing about how
Yeah.
music is attached to memory, right? And so if there are people of Latinx backgrounds that are that, like I know how to dance this dance and I can be like a vessel or I can be the facilitator, I can be most of the times it's the leader of followers, and for that to be meaningful in that, again, because it has to do with the elders in my community, there's something in that I'm more interested in mining than going back to competition, you know? And I,
Right.
for it to, in competition's one thing, it's like the way we practice it, the way lessons are sold in studios, like there's thriving because of capitalism, which I was certainly a part of in the earlier days of this practice. But then like, what does it mean to survive it at the same time that you're working against it and acknowledging that it's tied up with colonialism and enslavement? You know, those are realities, right?
Yeah. And I love how you're looking to the future, right? Like that's the question. It's like, how do we do better? Because I feel like a lot of what's wrapped up in these questions of like, well, I didn't do that, and fear and shame, and don't shame people, and like all these ways we talk about this and these reactions people have. It's like, let's forget about that. How do we go forward is the important thing. And I feel like that's what you're focused on, which I think is important.
You know, a big part. I'm so glad you brought up shame. I love talking about shame because, you know,
Go
honestly,
ahead.
this first semester of being in school, you know, and trying to deal with coloniality as a colonizer or somebody of a colonizer lineage, a big part of it is what's your story? Like, what's the story that brought you and your family here, right?
Yeah.
And for me, coming from a Catholic background and
Mhm.
also being queer and feeling as though that there was something about my own personal liberation
Right.
in
Right.
breaking from that. Well, you know
Uh-huh.
what I've started realizing in the past couple months of exploring this is that we have this Catholic practice of penance where
Mhm.
you're meant to
Mhm.
atone for your sins. And when
Yep.
I was growing up, it was like I'm 8 years old or something, and you have to go and you tell the priest, never a nun, always a priest, right? So there's that part of it, like talk about
Yeah.
genderedness, right? Um, you have to tell them your sins. It's like I didn't even know what sinning was. It's like you fought with your parents. It's like, well, you're 8 years old. That's what parents are kind of for. You know,
Yeah.
you're living in a
Yeah.
house with them, so that's kind of bound to happen. Is that the sin that we're talking about? I mean, like the sins of the
Yeah.
Catholic Church and what it means to atone. What it means for the Catholic Church to atone for its own sins is another question. But as
Yeah.
an adult and in dealing directly with the things we've been talking about, I think that what it would mean for me as a queer person to reclaim penance, to
Mm.
actually think about how to figure out what the maybe sin is the wrong word, but the privileges, right? There can be,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to say that it's always going to be a direct action that atones for direct privileges, but I think that to try to figure out what's commensurate with the privileges and then try to actively work to do my penance and to feel like that's a practice that you know, I grew up with it and it meant nothing. That's how I could rattle off the Hail Marys is because you just go say 10 of them and then it's over and done
Yep.
without any
Yep.
actual introspection, you know? Like although that is a practice I could see a lot of value in, and for me like realizing that and articulating that to myself has become really important in feeling like grounded in this work, you know.
100%. Yeah. I love that idea of like action. Action is the penance. Is like these are your privileges. What can you do with that that's going to make someone else's life more vibrant, better in some way? Do
Yeah, and
something good
also, but
out
I mean,
there.
but it's another one of those ideas, just like decolonizing dance sport. That's the name of my grant application. Like, you know, like that's an idea that comes to my head, and I think now, good you have that thought. But like now, what's the next step? Is well, who can you talk to? Who can we be listening to? How can it not be
Right.
about I've got this great idea, which is totally the way I'm conditioned. I mean, that's what white supremacy and
Yeah.
capitalism kind of conditions us, you know.
Yeah.
And like me and
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
white maleness, it's like it, are you going to be the best at what you're doing? Like that's so deeply ingrained that like to actually like take you know whatever's motivating you to like make it part of a larger dialogue is another that is like kind of for me now it's the next step.
Mm. And like the grant application itself, it's like, why are you the person to do this? And you're like, well, I don't want this to be about me, but
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky, and I'll name and be grateful to NIFA for supporting that decolonizing dance. But the first, I mean, it was like the first time I put those two words together. But luckily, I mean, luckily that was all just about learning from other people and just like let's take this and figure out who the consultants are, who are the thought partners, and that's been, I mean, that's a huge piece of this. I'll just name Marisa Molinar and Sydney Mosley because those two people have been integral to this thinking. As is Nadia Issa's classes. Those are three people who I have the benefit of learning from, and I just want to honor them. And like part of whatever this work is happening because of this process I've been in with those three really amazing artists and thought partners.
amazing. I love it. Name the people who've contributed to your journey.
like Elsie and Barbara. I mean, like that's they are big reasons why I can try to figure out what to do with ballroom dancing.
Yeah, I love it. I'm curious, what's one thing you're most proud of,
Sorry.
your creative journey, and we've sort of, I have a feeling what we've been talking about is what you refer to, but maybe something else. One sort of growth area or goal or something that you're working towards. So those two parts.
Yeah, yeah. I think that I've been thinking about this lately. I I really because for all the stuff that I do and care about doing in communities,
Mhm.
I also do this memoir. Like when I'm performing, like I perform. Sometimes it happens with Peter, and then a lot of the times it happens just if I'm on my own. Like I'll make these solo memoir type of things and like tell stories like that, and that has also been a big part of I've been performing weddings. Like I started performing my best friend's wedding when I was like 23 or something like that, and then just ended up writing these wedding ceremonies that's like telling the story of other people's coming together for
Mhm.
years. Like I did that for like 10 years, and the older I get, the more I'm like, this is it's something, it's meaningful. I did my sister's wedding, and telling that story and having it be somebody that's of my family, it feels like of my own, like it felt like I was in a way telling part of my own story, and for there to be some benefit beyond myself, I'm proud of that. But also I'm like, well, at some point, how are we handling death? I mean, like, I'm getting older, and like, what is that conversation going to be like? And how could, if it's a matter of, I love to cook, I dance, social dancing, telling the stories, like all of that stuff could be of benefit in trying to prepare for this, for that particular transition. And again, like talking about somebody as brilliant as Pompey, who creates this ceremony that is inviting, and I get to participate in it. And there's grief, but there's also this sense of community, and it's so intentional that yeah, I don't know what pride means. I don't know how motivated I am by doing any more weddings at the moment,
Uh-huh.
especially like considering the institution of marriage and what my relationship with it, which it's just a thing. But I think that in examining how we take care of one another in the like in our families and then beyond, and how art praxis could inform that.
Love it. So thoughtful. We need more of that.
I've been sitting around my house thinking for a year and a half or however long this COVID's been happening, right? I mean, and not the land where I live, the house where I live. Yeah.
Right. Wonderful. Speaking of COVID, let's
Yes.
shift into that. It's like the elephant in the room question.
Hmm.
Um, what has your creative life looked like in that time? And then what's given you life? Like what's kept you motivated,
Yeah.
vibrant, on fire through
Yeah.
through
Yeah.
the heinousness of it all?
Everything we've talked about leading up to this point, a lot of this has happened in the isolation of the past year, um,
Right.
and so like trying to think about a responsible dissemination of practice and what the future could be for in ballroom dancing in particular. Um, that's been a big part of it. Also, not being able to physically connect with any. I was in like 75 assisted living communities before. Like I'd go 3 times a day. I realized that was not. That was me that was me being in capitalism and not considering the waters I was swimming in. Not just trying to survive, but actually thriving. But also, it was draining. I mean, like like to go to 3 places, it's like is to also not. There's no way you can know everybody's name, right? So. I realized that it was this like kind of hamster wheel existence before, as fun and as beautiful as a lot of it was. That I am aware of what feels like a kind of a blessing in taking the time. It was really hard to not be able to connect with anybody because it was like it was like the thing that I could lean on. Like you might be using a walker, you might be in a wheelchair, you might have dementia of some form, but at least we have this thing that I know how to do, right? So it was like hard for my head too. But the thing that happened was I ended up my friend that I married, my very dear friend who I've known since high school, and we've danced together since high school, but never really worked together before, are now we put together a performance. So like we are in masks, and we started doing this last October only outdoors when it was really it's still kind of we're in the thick of it, And it's as restrictions are starting to ease up, we end up with a 8 routine performance, and we do seated stretches in between. And it's this it's this bringing of, she's like family to me, right? So it's this merging of someone who feels like family with these all these ideas about acknowledgement of form and how to create responsible practice, and bringing it into assisted living communities. And like just last week, they're starting, because everyone's vaccinated, right? They're starting to let us partner with residents again, which feels like this is what we were trying to get back to, and that the getting back to it is something that feels more intentional and in collaboration with somebody who's basically my family. And that it's all kind of more, it's more intentionally like community based, like locally based. It doesn't have, it has
Uh,
designs about being moving into the future responsibly, but just not the same ideas of about growth and progress that I had before COVID,
Interesting. Certainly resonates with me.
Yeah,
I was living that hamster wheel and then having that time. It's like, well, what can I do at this time? That's
yeah.
gonna maybe make a difference. That's, feels aligned with my purpose.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. Running around just to make the money because I needed to, 'cause I need to pay my rent.
Right.
But, you know,
And that's not
shit.
going away. That's not going away, right? I mean,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
like how, or what are all the different structural changes we're working toward that are going to be of benefit, to the larger whole, but
Mhm.
also help us, figure out how to set those boundaries, take that time.
Yeah. And the importance of community and being in space with people who are actually around us, because we haven't had that. You spoke to local community
Mhm.
and engagement there. I hope that's going to be a little more meaningful to people, and they'll be a little more intentional about that, because that's something that we haven't had, right? And people will see just what it means to them, hopefully.
Yeah, for sure. And like that brings up questions about the touring, like, I think
Mhm.
what it means to be like a dance and performing artist. Like, I don't know if everyone. I think that I'm not alone in that. Like, oh, touring. It seemed like it was this aspirational goal, right? And there's something like, yeah, fun about. Like, I love to travel, but yeah, I wonder about what the implications are for trying to tour work, or what that is, given what it means to want to be more intentionally in community. And not to like just intentionally limit it either, not to say that your work shouldn't go beyond where it was born, right? But I don't know. I don't know. What does it mean for presenters to make intentionally, supporting the local dance community in anywhere, right? I mean, that's another thing that brings up.
Mm, for sure. For sure. So you're thinking about all these things here in school.
Yeah.
Anything else kind of on the horizon we should keep an eye out for? It's all really uncertain right now, but anything exciting you want to share that we can support, keep an eye out for again?
Well, I'm really grateful to be in this regional dance development initiative cohort with several other really wonderful New England-based dance artists, and we're kind of at the beginning of process. We're going to be more in dialogue a couple of different opportunities, and it's all going to kind of culminate in something that's happening in March at the Institute of Contemporary Art. And so there's something happening in March, but like what I'm really excited about is that it's going to be about these dialogues along the way, and we'll see what comes of that thing. But because of everything we've been talking about, to be able to be focused on the dialogues themselves rather than the spotlight, which I'm so accustomed to. Where's my
Yeah,
light? I mean, like that's a thing. But to just to be like more purposeful about what that venue with that engagement is going to be like, given everything that we are learning.
yeah. Process over product is what they say in contemporary art, but
Right.
how do you really do that?
Right. Or by degrees, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Anything else you want to share before we sign off?
I'm grateful to you. Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely, I'm grateful for all you do.
Likewise. Well, I'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good luck with. I know you got a lot going on, school and
You too, but we'll do it. We'll be good.
everything you're making.
Yeah. But thanks again.
My pleasure. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. If this conversation resonated with you, you share it with someone who you think would also enjoy it. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And we will see you next time. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.